This Formula One history video is brought to you by Huel, whose delicious Black Edition ready-to-drink is a complete meal in a bottle. Get 15% off plus a free gift when you use code JBONE at huel.com/jbone. Formula One testing changed forever in May of 1986. Before then, it was very loosely regulated, if you could even call it regulated at all. There was no test week like you have now, where every team gets the same weekend of preseason testing. Every week was test week if your team had the financial means. Seriously, you could test your car out pretty much whenever you wanted back in the day. This ability to be constantly developing your car on track outside of race weekends, even smack dab in the middle of an ongoing Formula One season, obviously immensely benefited those teams with superior funding and resources. But it was not this lack of fairness that caused Formula One testing to change forever in 1986. It was, as is often the case when Formula One makes a large change, a tragedy. On May 15, 1986, Brabham driver Elio de Angelis was at the Paul Ricard circuit in France. Despite May being a month squarely within the Formula One season, he was not there to race. The French Grand Prix would not be until July. Instead, he was there to participate in mid-season testing for Brabham. Paul Ricard was, and remains, one of the most popular test circuits for teams due to its mild climate and wide array of different types of corners. Elio de Angelis had arrived at Brabham just months earlier with a massive chip on his shoulder. Just how big a chip, you ask? He was the replacement for Nelson Piquet, who had just moved to Williams after winning 2 World Drivers' Championships for Brabham in the past 5 seasons. De Angelis was well suited to this challenge, however, having established himself as one of the sport's top talents. Some of Elio de Angelis' Formula One accomplishments included 2 Grand Prix victories, the 1982 Austrian Grand Prix and 1985 San Marino Grand Prix, 3 pole positions, 9 podium finishes, and him being the youngest F1 podium finisher ever. Along with being a talented driver, De Angelis brought something else to the team as well. He was, by all accounts, one of the most well-liked drivers in all of Formula One. Despite coming from a very wealthy Roman family, De Angelis was not stuck up, but rather was said to be a true gentleman. The most famous story about De Angelis has to do with the fact that along with being an F1 driver, he was also a concert-level pianist. The story goes that he once serenaded the entire field of F1 drivers at a South African hotel ahead of the 1982 South African Grand Prix during a particularly stressful driver strike. Despite De Angelis' many talents, the 1986 F1 season started off terribly for Brabham, De Angelis, and his teammate and fellow Italian countryman Riccardo Patrese. Through the season's first 4 races, each of Brabham's 2 drivers had suffered 3 retirements apiece, with Patrese finishing P6 in San Marino to give Brabham their only points finish a quarter of the way through the 16-race 1986 F1 season. Brabham's newly redesigned chassis just was not cooperating well with their BMW engine, and something had to be done to turn the season around. So it was decided that after the Monaco Grand Prix, at which Brabham suffered their second double DNF of the season, they would be holding a mid-season testing session at Circuit Paul Ricard to try and right the ship. The private F1 testing sessions of the past differed from the official F1 testing sessions of today in many, many ways, but the biggest difference was undoubtedly in the safety department. Private F1 tests were not easy on a team's budget. This is especially true for those tests taking place in the middle of the F1 season, where car repairs and travel costs are already mounting for teams. For this reason, teams would try to keep private test expenses at a minimum. One way they would do this, well, that was by making fewer safety preparations. Teams figured that drivers were in less danger while alone out on the track, and thus the monetary cost to them to hire race-level medical and marshal personnel to keep on standby was not worth it. Most of the time, this laissez-faire attitude didn't come back to haunt them, and then it did. All this brings us back to May 15, 1986. While traveling at a high rate of speed on Circuit Paul Ricard, De Angelis' rear wing broke. The resulting loss of downforce caused his Brabham BT55 to crash into and flip over a barrier before erupting into flames. The impact did not kill De Angelis. He's said to have only suffered a broken collarbone and minor burns. What killed him was the lack of marshals and medical personnel on site. De Angelis died from smoke inhalation a little over a day after his crash, having inhaled a fatal amount of smoke while waiting to be extracted from his car by the limited number of marshals at the circuit that day. It only made matters worse that a medical helicopter was not already on standby at the circuit and instead had to be flown in from 30 minutes away. After this tragedy, Formula One implemented changes, the largest of them being that any testing done by teams must be done under the same highly organized safety conditions as a race. This was the first in a series of major testing changes that got us to where testing is today with its extreme limitations and rigid structure. While Formula 1 is incredibly safe nowadays, it's important that we all never forget the drivers like Elio de Angelis who unfortunately paid the ultimate price on the way to that being the case. If you want more F1 history videos like this one, I have made plenty of them, and I'll be putting 2 of my best ones on screen at the end of this video. Special shout out to my top YouTube channel members, Joe Max's #1 hater Snow, Brian Linton, Wolfslows Racing, Waffleophagus, Melissa Cruz, The Tater, Elmar Zuber, Daddy Fett, and David Hake. If you want your name shouted out right here in future videos, hit the join button just below this video. Until next time, folks, J-Bone. J-Bone!